But what we're not hearing is, what have we done by allowing the Taliban to take over Afghanistan? And what will it mean to us now and in the very near future? Perfect timing for us to have back with us our good friend John Guandolo. He is the president of Understanding the Threat. He's a former FBI agent. And you can go to his website, understandingthethreat.com. And a lot of information there, understandingthethreat.com. John, good to see you, bud. How are you?
I'm doing well. Always wonderful to be on with you.
Thank you, John. Thanks for your time. Well, the question, we're not hearing much about what it might mean that now that the Taliban has taken over Afghanistan. And I know this is very near and dear to you, but it's not in the news. And I don't know why, but how bad is this?
Well, it's catastrophic for a number of reasons. Number one, anytime you give this adversary a victory, it requires them, per their own doctrine, Sharia, Islamic law, to fight harder. Because from their perspective, they're being given something by God, and they're required to utilize it for the benefit of the entire Islamic community. That's their perspective. And so when we retreat the way we did from their perspective, it makes them not only have to fight harder, but it emboldens them and gives them a lot of motivation to do more. And the other big part of this that we cannot forget is, unlike what our military and civilian leaders have said, which is not true, about the relationship between the Taliban and al-Qaeda, those two are married to one another. The leadership of al-Qaeda, going back to Osama bin Laden, swore fidelity to the leadership of the Taliban and the Taliban itself. So that means al-Qaeda is the external operational arm of the Taliban. And so when we surrender to the Taliban and do what we did, we're inviting attacks by al-Qaeda. So I don't think it's mysterious as to why recently al-Qaeda has said, we are coming after America now, and these attacks will be more painful than 9/11. This is what surrendering to the Taliban in Afghanistan and allowing them to run roughshod over us, and then having our military four-star generals say that we're working with the Taliban and giving them intelligence because they're helping us. This level of disconnect from reality is as dangerous as it gets.
Where's ISIS in the picture?
Well, you know, the interesting thing is when you talk about these different groups, the Islamic State, formerly ISIS, al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, Abu Sayyaf, al-Shabaab, in different areas of the world, Hezbollah, the only difference between these groups is they want to be the ones in charge. But they all have the same goal, and that's to establish a global Islamic state, a caliphate is what they call it, under Islamic law. So they're all working in this together. It's just about power.
John, we're seeing now that the numbers of Americans left is significant. They're begging the president to do something. Are we incapable at this moment of going in there and getting them?
No, absolutely not. The United States could go in and destroy the Taliban and actually get our people back. We have the capacity to do that. We have the capability. We don't have military commanders, I don't believe, that are capable. They've demonstrated, four-star General McKenzie, four-star General Milley, the chief of staff. These people are not just incompetent. I think what they've done is treasonous. I think they, as much as they've said so, but at a minimal, they're criminally negligent. So from a leadership perspective, I don't believe we're capable. We have, the military has the capability to do the operations.
Can you tell me how it is handled between the White House, the State Department, and the military in a private meeting with the president? Who has the final say?
The president of the United States does.
All right, so the military could say one thing and the State Department could say something else, and he has to decide between the two.
Or, right, one of the two options or something in between that he comes up with, yes.
All right, so the Taliban and whatever group we want to call them is totally emboldened now. Where will they get their money?
Well, from a couple places. Number one, Qatar is, as we know, is a main funder of the global jihad, both ISIS and Al-Qaeda. We have a lot of money that comes from a variety of places. Iran is the largest funder of Hamas currently, and has been for 2 to 3 years, maybe longer. So we have that on the table. And of course, Hamas is an inherent part of the International Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood is the largest controller of the U.S. Islamic community. So you've got all that going on, but we can't forget that based on what public reports we have seen, China is investing heavily in Afghanistan. China is funding, at least has said publicly they will, and in some cases are for certain things, like the development of the minerals or the control of the mineral rights there. So China's hand is in this as well, which makes it even more dangerous.
I know that you have tracked the Islamic influence in Europe for a long time, and it's hard for us here in the West to believe that Europe actually struggles between parliamentary law and Sharia law, but somehow in some areas they're coexisting. With the emboldenment of Afghanistan now, what message is that set to the Islamic Jihad people in Europe?
Well, I think the message is relatively clear across the Islamic world. If the United States can be brought down, then France and Spain and the Netherlands and these other countries don't have a chance. That's the perspective of the adversary. Now, they have done their homework. The Islamic movement's done their homework, and they know which of the countries are really teetering and which ones are going to require more long-term effort. But I think what we have said publicly, understanding the threat, is said from our intelligence perspective, our analysis is that you will see as the next wave of quote-unquote Afghan refugees enters Europe and continues to enter the United States, you will see the next wave of increased violence. The difference is this time in Europe is it will be accompanied by the call for the establishment of the caliphate by Turkey and the re-establishment of a caliph, which we assess will be Erdogan, who's currently the president of Turkey. And then you're going to see violence like we haven't seen since the 1500s.
Okay, you bring up an interesting point, because we're hearing bits and pieces that some of the so-called allies of Afghanistan, Afghan allies that have been transferred into the United States are infiltrated with people who are not allies. We're seeing it with, unfortunately, the misuse of women and children in some of these camps. So given what may be coming out of Afghanistan in the United States and Europe as a means of getting these people out, and the open border, are you tracking what may be seen as an infiltration at one of the highest levels ever of this kind of thinking and mentality?
Yes, I think and that's a really good question, by the way. I think what we're seeing here in our professional opinion is the willing actions by the federal government in the United States to bring people who are necessarily hostile. At the same time, they are, and they did, our president did, and our military did, provide our adversaries with literally billions of dollars of equipment. We emboldened them. We actually gave them intelligence about the names of Afghans and who helped us, the names and locations of U.S. citizens still in Afghanistan, and it's as if we just handed them over for the slaughter. And we know what the Taliban has been doing. They've been locating people and killing them who they believe or know helped allied forces, the United States and our allies. So what do we call that? What excuse are we going to make for the president and his national security staff if that's not direct and willing complicity with our adversaries, and to publicly call our adversaries our friends? And this is General McKenzie, General Milley, President of the United States, his national security advisor. I think calling it treason is almost to be generous. This is unprecedented what our government leadership has done, and to call them traitors, again, I think at least that's what they are.
This past week, we heard comments also from this administration that when it comes to China, we are welcoming the competitiveness. And I realize you track a lot on the jihad side, but over to China just for a moment, it seems like that mentality of how we're treating the spread of jihad throughout the world is now being applied to China somehow. Well, we welcome the competitiveness. I mean, what kind of a statement is that?
So that's the kind of statement I would expect. And I should say, understanding the threat, we track the communist movement as well, because both at the international level and down to the local level. So at the international, national, state, and local level, the jihadi organizations like Hamas, Muslim Brotherhood, Hezbollah, Iran are working directly with communist groups like Comintern, Communist Party USA, Democratic Socialists of America, Black Lives Matter, Antifa. At the ground level, they are working hand in hand. And if you are in a meeting with them, it's almost indistinguishable who's who. So that's why we track them, because they are working hand in hand. And the statements I'm hearing from the president and his spokeswoman are exactly what I would expect from a administration that has seized power in the United States and has, the most easily identifiable communist in the Congress is Kamala Harris. And that was long before she was vice president. If you look at the work that Trevor Loudon has done in identifying the 6 or so dozen members of Congress that are easily identifiable as Marxist communists, you understand that we're witnessing the fruition of a 100-year effort by the Communist Party in the United States. And they have literally seized power. You and I have talked about this. James Comey admitted in the New York Magazine in 2003 he was a communist. John Brennan voted for Communist Party officials. We have Maoists and identified communists at the senior levels of our government. And this is just the reality of where we are. So what's happening right now is intentional. So when I hear them say these comments about China, it's because they're working with the Chinese Communist Party.
We're also witnessing something, John, that's been almost historic. We're watching, I think we're beyond awakening. We have woke up in America that we don't want this. Now, granted, the other guy is in charge right now, but we don't want this. I mean, there is pushback at all levels. Where do you think this may go?
Well, if you look at the nature of where the adversary is, meaning how advanced the communist movement is in this country, in the financial realm, in the business realm, the governmental realm, especially at the federal level, where all components of the government are penetrated heavily by communists, and certainly in the White House and the national security realm by suit-wearing jihadis. The work that Understanding the Threat does is to empower citizens with tools to both organize and go after these hostile threats at the local level. We believe that's the only way to be effective. At the federal level right now, it's fully and potentially irreversibly corrupted until the local, county level, and the state level are, we see the reinstitution of Republican form of government. But you have an administration, Perry, that is, we now know, seized power unlawfully that was not the will of the people, and therefore we're operating in a post-constitutional republic. And I think people are starting to wake up that, oh, I see. What happened on January 6th wasn't an insurrection against the federal government. It was the American citizens utilizing their unalienable rights, as you say accurately, rising up to say, we believe what happened was wrong. And of course, now we know the evidence that's in is there was no organized effort by the citizens. There was an organized effort by the Biden administration and by the Democrat Party in league with, well, because they are the Communist Party in the United States, to seize power. And now people are starting to see that things we were saying 8 to 12 years ago is now actually what's happening at the ground level.
I want to come back just for a moment, John, and respecting the time here, I want to come back to the Middle East just for a moment. The Abraham Accord is still in place, but given the core motivation of an Islamic state, of Sharia law, and the emboldenment of the Taliban in Afghanistan, I don't know where the enemy of my enemy is my friend plays into this. Is the Abraham Accord weakened or strengthened because of the civil rivalry between the various groups?
I think these kinds of agreements, honestly, are useless. And as evidenced by the U.S. failures in Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, Africa, and pretty much everywhere, not to mention our utterly failed domestic counterterrorism strategy and our really unbelievably incoherent foreign policy, is a result of having no understanding of this enemy. So at a time when the Muslim Brotherhood, when the Islamic leadership in the United States is telling Muslim citizens, as it has for the last 3 to 4 months, to prepare for jihad, at a time when Al-Qaeda is telling us that new attacks are coming that are more painful than 9/11, and at a time Turkey is pushing foreign diplomats, including the United States, out of Turkey, these are huge red flags. And to your point, these accords and those like them have no bearing in this war, because our leaders and I would say at the state level too, because I think governors have greatly failed us, understand that 100% of this adversary, while they can fight amongst each other and even kill each other, they are unified in establishing a global Islamic state under Allah's divine law, Sharia. And so Iran and Saudi Arabia are joined in that objective, yet they will destroy each other if given the opportunity.
Gosh, I'm out of time, but I got to ask this question. Did the Trump administration understand this threat?
No, they did not.
Okay, because I think that's a key point. I mean, they made some good moves, but did they understand the core of the threat?
No, I mean, Mr. Trump articulated publicly on CNN, and he was the only national leader from either party in 20 years to say, look, Islam hates us, and I think we need to figure out why. Because his gut understood that, and that's true. That's what they teach 10-year-old Muslim children in U.S. Islamic schools, is that non-Muslims are the worst of all creatures and should be hated and despised for the sake of Allah. It's what they teach. And so that lack of understanding of how well coordinated from the international level down to the individual mosque level this movement is completely lost on our leaders.
You know, that's heavy stuff, and I get it. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, John worked hard at this, you can tell. Understandingthethreat.com is his organization. There's where you go, where you can track this. They've been frontline warriors for a long time in all this, and I know that was heavy to hear, but wake up, wake up. One quick question, John. You have said on numerous occasions this morning that that we are now poised for an attack at the level, if not greater than 9/11. That's hard to swallow. But nonetheless, the reality is there. And I'm not looking for somebody to blame, but on the other hand, wouldn't this be a direct result of this failed foreign policy of this administration by what they did in Afghanistan?
Absolutely. I think you can tie, as a matter of fact, we just published a report, directly showing the link, Taliban, Al-Qaeda, Muslim Brotherhood. And so by doing that, you've empowered the prominent Islamic organizations in the United States, which are all hostile, as a matter of fact, and evidence entered into massive counterterrorism trials in the United States. So these groups exist at the local level across the United States. And from the 9/11 attacks to Boston Marathon bombing, to the Fort Hood attack, to the Orlando killing, to the Chattanooga killing of 4 Marines and a Navy sailor in the United States, this network supports attacks. And not one state, not one governor, not one state Homeland Security Department or DPS has done anything about ripping down these networks in their community. And as long as you allow those to exist, you're allowing the adversary a support network to conduct attacks and a platform from which they can launch attacks at the state level. And citizens can do something about that by holding their DPS leadership and their governors accountable. And they ought to do it, because you're not going to get any help. This administration is hostile to the Constitution and hostile to the American people. But you can hold your local leaders and your state leaders accountable.
UnderstandingTheThreat.com. That's John's website, UnderstandingTheThreat.com. Thank you, brother. God bless. Keep up the good work. Stay safe.
God bless you. Thank you.